So if we're not training, we're decaying. And the idea there is we're training. What are we training for? Why do we say training? We're training for our jobs. We're training for that hike you want to do or the biking you want to do. We're training to make sure that our movement is beneficial. Because even the average Joe is bending over 4,000 times a day to do whatever. They're breathing 20 to 30,000 times a day. So if we can train those things that we're doing, make them better, more functional, that's really healing from the inside out. That's the goal here. That's what we're doing with all the weights. We're actually trying to train our hips and our shoulders and our spine to work right. It's not just to get stronger and look good at the beach. That's not the goal. We're training for life. That's really what we try to promote here at the Fix and at Ridgeline is training. Heal yourself. So the goal with a lot of these therapeutic type movements is not that we're trying to replace anything, any of the big macro movements we're doing. We're actually training essentially the initial motion, because the initial motion should start in the hips and in the shoulders, and that spine should maintain that lengthened state. And as we get deeper into the position, that's when the spine can help out. Because we're going to be stronger with that spine helping out. But so many of us start the motion, like let's say in our SI joints, it might even look like half decent form, but I can tell that the lower lumbar and the SI joints actually initiated that motion there. So we're just training that even with like the RDL here, where we're not using too much knee motion, compressing those hips in that socket. So then I hinge, it's all hip. I've taught that lumbar spine to lengthen and those SI joint, the pelvic structure, to hold in and stabilize, not put a strain on that joint tissue. That's all that we're doing. We're trying to get you to feel that hip range of motion, not letting the spine do the work. Guiding that. You're keeping everything else you've been taught. You're just gonna find that, okay, that's my end hip range motion. Now, when I let the spine help out, I can get down, let the knees help out, right? Same thing here. If I'm starting that range of the motion, doing really strict RDL, the spine can help out. I can get lower, okay, but see what the spine has done? Both are good, but if you definitely have an injury or you know that your hips aren't initiating the movement, you want to work on maybe just getting down to there, only using the hips, coming back up. Because even there, a lot of strain. Breath in, lengthen, press. I like that breath in because it allows me to re-engage and be strict. Shaking, right? Just holding that is tough. Where normally getting past the knees is an easy thing, but the spine has helped out. And you add weight on this, that's going to start to damage that spine over time. And what we'll feel is the muscular system will be really have a lot of laxity and movement, and the spine, the joints of the spine will become rigid, and you'll feel the spine is just sandwiched in compression. So then it doesn't really matter how much weight we put overhead, how much we resist gravity, because that spine has been taught to just stay sandwiched like that. So we could have a really flexible person, but it's all in the muscles, and they keep stretching and stretching, getting deeper into their stretches, and the joint of the spine becomes stiffer and stiffer and stiffer. And that's what we want to avoid, because they just think, oh, I need more movement, I need more movement, but they're having so much pain and discomfort coming in to see the chiropractor 4 times a week. I see this all the time. It's not rare, especially a lot of yoga instructors who just think deeper and deeper and deeper into the stretch. They don't think about this resistance, this isolated motion in the shoulders and hips. It's an easy concept, but it becomes very difficult to apply if you've taught yourself to move a certain way. So if we're not training, we're decaying. That's what happens. And when the joints stiffen, it's actually what we call degenerative joint disease, DJD. So it's fusing because it has to protect what? The nerve roots, the spinal cord. That's its ultimate function, besides giving motion, is to protect the nerves, because that's your lifeline. Starts pressing on a nerve, pulling on a nerve, not just pain down your leg, not just tingling down your arm. Those nerves go to your organs too. So your gut diseases, your heart diseases could all come from that compression of the spine. That's when I sometimes get in people's faces, because I can see that outlet. It's not just about, oh, I get this little sprain in my back, just need to take a few weeks off. There's more going on there, and your chiropractor can see a lot more than you know. You listen to the pain, because the pain is telling you probably what's there times 10. There's something far worse. The pain is just the tip of the iceberg. There's something insidious underneath that's causing neurological stress. And it's all about stress. There's toxic stress from what we're breathing in. There's stress emotionally, and then there's mechanical stress. Mechanical stress is the big one that's just missed all around. People are focusing on their diets. They're seeing their therapist, to make sure that they feel happy. But the mechanical stress, once we get that going and make a lot of strength there, it's going to help you on all ends. You're going to be less susceptible to the toxins you're breathing in. Even with these masks, everyone breathing, no one's taking those big, deep breaths where the pelvic floor is engaging the diaphragms, engaging the spines, lengthening. That's why they're passing out. It's just because their lungs and their internal pressure is so weak that they can't breathe through this subtle mask. It's not the mask that's the problem, it's your ability to breathe that is the problem. So we're going to talk about ankle recovery. Now, stretching can actually damage it. You think if there's an injury already, if it's a sprain injury, the last thing you want to do is really stretch it, because you can make that area worse. You can damage it. So we want to take more of an active approach, but we do want to break up tissue at the same time. And this applies well to a lot of the exercises I'm trying to teach people with the isolated hip and shoulder motion. It's actually getting a little bit of resistance to help you train to push against something. And that leads to more activation in the spine and the rest of the body, and will help us with all our other types of workouts. So this is a pull-up assist band. You can just loop it around, whatever you got here. I got this handy hook. And we're working on my right foot today, but you can work on whatever foot's bothering you. So we're going to run through all different range of motions. I'm going to get it kind of right above what we call the talus bone. So it's on top of that talus, the navicular bone there. And we're just going to take a bit of a step out with that foot, get some tension. Don't go crazy right off the bat. What we're going to do here is put that back, ball the foot down, and we're just going to do some leg traces. But first we want to push off that back toe, weight that front hip, and you're going to notice that the front foot is actually going to activate a little bit. So we're pushing all that weight, stacking our torso over top of that foot, and then so those 3 points of contact are engaging. That's the ball the big toe, ball the small toe, and the heel, creating that triangle like a suction cup. So you're widening the foot, pushing away, pushing off that foot. That push through the floor translates into the hip and then allows me to lengthen the rest of the spine. And that's what I need to get going before I think about tracing the inner and outer thigh. So take your time. This might feel a little bit off balance. I'll probably fall over once or twice. So getting here, just going to trace this hand down. The right hand's going to trace up my torso. And like that. And then we'll do the other side, lengthening. Sorry. Forget my own rules sometimes. Just run through that again. Find your balance. That feels like it's slipping onto the ankle. You might need to take a bigger step there. It's just slipping a little bit. So I want to keep that tension more on the top of the foot, right where that, what we call the mortise joint is. Lengthening, getting ourselves over top. Tracing. I tend to breathe with all my motions because I forget to breathe if I don't. So the spine's helping out, but the majority of that movement I'm trying to keep in that hip. So you're gonna feel a lot of that musculature engaging and stretching at the same time. So we refer to it as an active stretch. Engaging the weaker muscle that doesn't want to work, stretching the tight muscle that's trying to control the motion. So you gotta be really active about it. Next, I'm gonna take a step forward with this other foot. And then I'm gonna kind of push off that toe, getting just more stretch along all those, what we call the extensor digitorum, which brings the foot up, stretching all those tendons there. Again, we're gonna lengthen here. I'm gonna go up overhead, we don't really need to, and then just tilt a little bit. And we're gonna do a couple heel raises. Not really even trying to get the heel down, just it's more about the push off that matters. So you're relaxing, pushing up to that front left hip, pushing. Don't forget to breathe. Again, foot and hip all getting some love there. And you'll know when it's fatigued and tired. Next, work the outside. That's where I have a lot of scar tissue. You could definitely reverse this and go the other way, but if most people don't know about their lateral arch, but we have an outside arch that's supposed to lift as well. So the band's gonna help us there because we're gonna be gauging, helping us cup that floor a little bit. So same thing here. We're just gonna do some squatting motions. Get that foot to react. Now, with all squatting motions, I think it should start with a hip hinge. Hip hinge, like you're doing an RDL, and then the spine and the knees help out. But again, we're trying to get that spine pretty relatively stiff. And encourage more motion here in the hips. All right, good. So next one we're gonna do here, just more of a deeper lunge. Bring that knee down to the ground. Arms out in front. I like that activation of the hands just because it reminds your foot to grab. That's what you're trying to do with your foot. Widen and cup. Widen the foot and cup. We're not trying to bunch the foot. Bring that knee off just a little bit. And you're gonna rotate over the front leg. Breathe in, lengthen. Exhale, twisty. And you might feel like you have more success with it here or here, so you can play around with it. There's kind of infinite possibilities there. Again, I know this is my surgery foot, spending the time there. But I also notice working the thighs here. This one's a big one for me, so I'll show you this one. Getting it up there on the inner thigh. You're gonna take a big, make sure I'm not pulling on the mic here. Step up, pull out like that. And I just like to sink in a little bit, get some hip range of motion. It's gonna force you to be active than normal just because you got the band there. Your leg's automatically gonna pull against it a little bit. And you can do some Spidey lunges there. I like going both directions. You can reach through first, really hit that hip. Same thing there, reach. And down. Let's do that again. Reach. Good. And you could even take another step forward for that position. And repeat. Say kind of infinite possibilities with all these things. Let's work the other leg. Inner thigh. So you always want to compare if you don't know. Just because you got pain doesn't mean that's the leg you should be working on. But even though this is the injured foot, I feel like this thigh is definitely looser. You'll notice it with the arms too, like, oh yeah, it's a little easier on this side. just gonna step through. Just a little bit of resistance. Challenging things that aren't used to being challenged. Good. Just a few more things here. Really, it's going to be you exploring what works for you. Right behind the knee, kind of into the hamstring a little bit. Another one that's good. Even just doing squats gives you something to drive back against. You could definitely do both knees too. Doesn't always have to be one-sided. And that just helps driving those knees back in there. I just like to do one-sided because then I can feel, okay, that one's stronger than that one. I know what I need to work on now. And then I definitely can switch this around the other direction. Some people find this more comfortable. Especially if you're someone who likes to let your knees go way past your toes, which isn't necessarily bad all the time, but it definitely tells you maybe you're not getting enough range of motion in your hip joints. I also like, because this helps me drive out with my knees more. It's things you don't think about, because it's like you're pushing against an invisible force, so now there's just something there. Okay, I can feel that, I can push against that. I'm going down, I'm coming up. And it might even actually make you feel more stable, especially if you got an injury. This could help you move without feeling the pain. That's letting you know that you're doing something right, if the pain doesn't hurt. When it was there before, you're walking around like, ow, ow, that hurts my foot. Some people are like, I'm just gonna stretch it out and roll it. You're like, oh, no, that hurts. So be more active about it. Using those muscles, that's what really opens up the joints, widens the foot. Well, last time we talked a lot about the rotator cuff. So they have the same idea in the hip. So we're gonna try to apply that. All the stuff we've done so far is definitely approaching, compressing that hip in the socket. And that's really the main goal. It's not really thinking, oh, I need to turn the hip in more and I'm turning it out. It's engaging, pulling it in. And then you'll notice once you've gauged that hip in, compress that into the socket, it'll force it to move better. And that's the same idea with the shoulder. It doesn't really matter where it's rotated. You just have to activate those muscles. And you'll notice that automatically gives me a little bit of length to my spine as soon as I just think about pulling my hips in, pulling my shoulders in, neck gets longer, spine gets longer, it's more engaged. And that's the goal there, just trying to keep that throughout our different motions. The last time with the rotator cuff, we talked about this being a good test, this upended kettlebell position. And I failed a little bit falling it into that lunge, but that's gonna attack those hips a little bit more, because as soon as I drive up, my pelvis, my spine is going to take all that weight to push that overhead. And that's not necessarily what we want, because it's going to challenge the rotator cuff more in the shoulder, but also in the hip. If I keep my shoulders and hips linearly, vertically lined up. So tightening, I'm just going to step back just a little bit and then press in. So hopefully if I do this from the side, and you can keep your hand there just to remind you, keep that stomach, iliopsoas engaged, that if I'm driving up from here, ear, shoulder, and hip, more in a straight line than they probably would be if I was there. You can see how that pelvic structure is just a little bit forward. You can definitely try to drive it back. And I'll show you a new little exercise that Dr. Daniel shared with me called the kettlebell. What's it called? I don't know, we'll share it with you. We're gonna do a little different anyway, so we'll make up a name for it. Let's do the other side. Same thing here, I'm just gonna reverse the legs. I can already feel just stepping back. This side is gonna be the challenging side. Hip and shoulders like to go out together. You got a bad shoulder, you're gonna have a bad hip. And the spine takes the brunt in the middle. Spine's always going to try to make up for what the hips and shoulders aren't doing. That's why we have so much motion in the spine. It's going to compensate for any imbalances, try to keep us going straight, keep our eyes level. Yeah, even with this light bell, this is a challenging exercise. Major burn right in here, that's where you want it. All right, good. To get to the point where you just feel like you can't do anymore, so it's not like I'm gonna set some reps for you. I think it's called a half press, kettlebell half press. So we're just gonna grab it up there. And all we're gonna do is, instead of going overhead, because the same problem, kind of compress my spine to get it up over there. You can see like, whoa, look at that shoulder motion, but what is my spine doing? What are my hips doing? So as I go up, the hips are gonna go back. This is gonna look similar to what I've done before. We were just here with it, but I like how it targets just a little bit. Both are good. So I'm gonna press more at an angle, and the hips are gonna come back just a little bit. So I'll show it from the side. Breathe in, get tall, lengthen, compress those hips in the socket, shoulders compressed in the socket, elbows kind of gripping your rib cage. Glide and press. And again, you're gonna kind of feel this all over. Even your feet really have to grip and grab here so you don't fall backwards. And you'll know you're doing it right if you feel like, whoa, I'm gonna fall back. That's how you know you've kind of pushed your weight into your heels. We're not arching the spine. A lot of people do that at the start, where they're kind of compressing that lumbar spine. We're locking that tailbone down a little bit, especially if you got a lot of curve like me in that low back. You're keeping that low lumbar spine lengthened. You're not tucking the tailbone either, but you might need to add a little bit of a tuck and then just try to maintain that length. Again, hips and shoulders, and kind of mid-back. Getting those strong breaths with that. And most people say that you're leaking energy when you're breathing out like that. That's okay, I'm trying to train you how to breathe. When you're trying to survive a workout, yeah, it is better to just inhale, press it, then take your breath. You'll last longer, but here we're trying to target different things. We're not just trying to get through the workout, but actually strengthen those rib cage muscles, spinal muscles, hip and shoulders, and all that fun stuff. Good.